Katie Lasso. This is Frank Salvado. He's a criminal defense attorney, and he's been giving us a lot of insight into what we have seen playing out. We are on day 3 of this trial. We had jury selection. Then yesterday we had opening statements from both the defense and the prosecution. We've heard from a number of witnesses, but possibly the most compelling witness has taken the stand. She was on the stand yesterday. She's been on the stand all day today. Let's talk about the past few hours. Really only about an hour and a half. It feels like so much longer, Frank. I mean, we heard a lot from Juliana, specifically from the defense attorney. He was asking her a lot, let's start at the beginning, about the conversations she had with some journalists while she was in jail. Let's talk about those. Why are those important?
I think those are important from the defense perspective. It's certainly relevant to her motivation here, that she is kind of selling her story versus how she's portrayed it throughout the trial, that she's just there to tell the truth. If someone is just there to tell the truth, they're generally not out negotiating deals with journalists to get paid for their story. That was a pretty remarkable exchange, that she's had so much back and forth with journalists trying to sell her story, and not only selling her story, but negotiating about selling her story. That, I think, really impacts her credibility.
Right, you mentioned the negotiation. She talks in one of the letters or conversations, I think it was the jail mail system that they have. She talks about how she had a call with Netflix and they offered her more money, and she said she wanted more money, and then there's this exchange about deserving money, how much money she deserves. And I believe, he said, why do you believe you deserve this? And she said, for what I've been through.
That was a startling exchange, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because here she is, basically portraying herself as the victim in this entire thing. I deserve more money for what I've been through. When you have families of the decedents in a courtroom and the jury sees them there, they've just seen autopsy pictures, they've seen some gruesome crime scene pictures, and then she comes in and says, well, I deserve more money for what I've been through. I think the defense did a really nice job of grabbing that moment, and I think that probably turned some stomachs on the jury for her to say something like that. It was very awkward, very uncomfortable.
If you're the prosecutor in that situation and you hear your star witness, if you will, saying something like that, what's going through your mind?
So the prosecutor is sitting there in a difficult position because the defense has just made some good points. The witness has said what I've been through. That was obviously a terrible statement. So the prosecutor really doesn't have an opportunity to talk to that witness during the breaks. So the prosecutor is going to have to make a decision on redirect. Do I just leave that alone and just explain it later? Or do I say, what do you mean by when you said what I've been through? They could get a good answer from her, or they could get something that's even worse. So it'll be interesting to see to what extent they get into that on redirect, or whether they just leave it alone and they just want her off the stand at this point.
And I think what you said is important to mention as well. The prosecution can come back and ask her more questions. Just because they already asked their questions, they still have that opportunity to come back and talk to her again. The defense talked a lot about how she's really focused on her future. That conversation, it's kind of this along the same lines, but why was that something that was important for him to bring up, the future?
Because she wants to get out of jail. It's really as simple as that. So if she's focused on negotiating a number for her future, for everything that she's been through, that really dovetails pretty nicely into her motivation of striking this deal, making up, in the defense's view, this story, and in fact her own words often say story, in order to get out of jail, get back to her family, and have money in her pocket. That's where they're coming from.
Yeah, and he's using the word story, but she keeps going back to that word truth, which is super important here. They spent a lot of time as well talking about the different reasons for the conversations and, talking about specific dates. He was going very intensely at her about specific dates and things she remembered on dates and times, and you could see her really starting to get frustrated. What's the reasoning to try to ask such specific questions? Is it to irritate her?
Could be two reasons. It could be, and they're not mutually exclusive, it could be to irritate her because she was clearly getting irritated. Generally speaking, the jury is going to like the lawyers that are in the courtroom. They have experience with them. They've dealt with them over the past several days. So when she becomes testy, when she becomes difficult and unlikable, that could be a tactic in and of itself. You want her to be unlikable. And certainly when she eye rolls, when she becomes testy, when she's being difficult with the lawyer that they probably like, that is really beneficial. The second reason is they could be setting her up for a witness. So perhaps the defense has a witness, maybe a forensic witness or an expert, that's going to say, listen, she said this date, this date, this date, it's not possible. We've reviewed the computer and what she says is just factually inaccurate. So there could be a couple of reasons going on there, but on the surface, that testiness, that fighting, when you're fighting with somebody like John Carroll, with his demeanor, you're probably going to lose that battle.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see how the jurors were reacting to her reactions to him, so kind of that trifecta. But, you know, speaking of people that were getting frustrated, let's talk about the judge here. You know, a couple of times you heard her helping the prosecutor remember that they can object. You called that earlier.
I might have predicted a little bit along those lines. Is I think what the judge is saying is just give me your objection, one word, and I think she even used it. Just give me your one-word objection. It's a little bit awkward in parts. I think the judge wants to get to it, as has been reported from in the courtroom, but the judge has gotten a little bit impatient as this has dragged on. She wants a one-word objection. She wants to rule on the objection. She is a really good umpire. She wants to call balls and strikes. She doesn't want the pitcher to throw the ball and then argue in 10 sentences when it could be, is this a ball or a strike? She's just calling balls and strikes, and they're really not giving her the opportunity to do that with these awkward objections.
I'm curious to see what Matthew Torres can tell us once he comes out of the courtroom. Back to Juliana, though. She keeps saying over and over, I'm not going to guess. Where did she get that kind of language to present? Because she's very specific, like, I'm not going to guess. You told me not to guess. I'm not going to guess.
Well, Juliana is getting advice from all angles, right? She may have gotten some advice from the prosecutor. She may have gotten that as a preface to some of Mr. Carroll's questions. Please don't guess. She may have gotten that from the judge. We don't want you to guess. I mean, she even said at one point she was getting advice from people in the jail about how to negotiate this deal. So she's got a lot of advice coming in and direction from everybody. Not sure where the I'm not going to guess came from. She may just be tired of answering questions, so she doesn't want to guess is her easy way out of answering any questions.
Yeah, and she has been saying that quite a bit. She's been up there for quite a bit, and he's been grilling her. Do you think that the jury is going to sympathize with her at all and feel the frustration she's feeling, or absolutely not?
I don't see that frustration. The judge is not. The judge is allowing the cross-examination. Now, if the judge said, listen, Mr. Carroll, I've heard this cross-examination. We're not going to go over this again, or she chastises him in some way or yells at him in some way, whole different story. But the judge is completely fine with the cross-examination. So when she's getting frustrated, but the judge is not, that's a problem.
You know, we've heard from the defense a lot. Do you think that the prosecution, we've spoken a little bit about it, do you think they are going to come back, or are they going to let this end here?
Really difficult situation, because when a prosecutor calls a cooperator on direct, they've talked to them about every single question, or they should. Only a foolish lawyer would call a witness that they don't know what the answers are going to be. So she's very well prepared on the direct. They did not know how the cross-examination was going to go. So now they're kind of stuck because they haven't gone over some of these questions with her. So do they roll the dice and ask her those open-ended questions? It could get better. She could finish on a high note, or it could get worse if she continues this contentious kind of back and forth.